Hello and welcome to Insight Live, the IT Experts Take. I'm Jason Rader, your host, and today we'll be talking about realizing long-term value with the modern edge. We got a couple of experts with me that are going to give you their take. We've got Rob Parsons, Portfolio Director, here with me at Insight, and Michael Nardone, who's the Director of Engineering and for Managed Solutions here at Insight. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Jason.
So, getting long-term value out of modern edge. I think we've done some shows about modern edge before. So kind of bring those who are newbies or just tuning in. What are we talking about when we say modern edge?
So I'm happy to kick us off, and Michael, just keep me honest. But I mean, modern edge is really the proliferation of a lot of the data that we intake, a lot of the applications that we run, moving closer to the users at the edge of our infrastructure. And with that, brings a lot of unique benefits, but also some challenges that, we have to change the way we think about security. We have to think about optimizing the connectivity, and ultimately giving a good user experience when we're making those changes.
Yeah, I completely agree, Rob. And how we really look at it is just bringing that compute and processing closer to where you're generating your data at. So we see, near edge scenarios, far edge scenarios, and really everything in between as just the amount of connected devices in the world continues to grow at really an exponential rate year over year.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And thanks. So there's a lot of elements to that, and we've been talking about modern edge and intelligent edge for a while. I think with the amount of data, and we've got some great stats that we pulled from different places. I think one of the 35% of the average organization's data estate is driven by edge workloads today. That's an interesting stat. That's a big number to me. What do you guys think about that?
It's higher than I expected, to be completely honest. But I think it shows where the action's happening in the market, and really a lot of the thought process in enterprise organizations to be able to move those workloads to where they're most efficient.
And I think, we think of our traditional models, right? Compute and network and store, everything's getting done in our centralized traditional data centers or even modern cloud hyperscalers. And that stat really shows that compute and edge is going to continue to make its exodus from those classic locations.
And do you think the capabilities that are available from the devices and the capabilities that exist in an edge environment these days have driven that number higher than it would have traditionally been? I mean, in the past, we wouldn't have been able to process that far outside of the data center. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. When you look at the proliferation of 5G, LTE technology, private cellular networks, radio access networks, it's both that combination of the compute enhancements, right? So the devices, the sensors in the field becoming way more performant, right? And as connectivity patterns have hugely increased to support those, now you're seeing things that traditionally could only be done in a data center or in a public cloud hyperscaler, now able to be done at the edge.
So, and I'm super stoked. We've been talking a lot about data based on all of the chat GPT and GPT stuff that's been going on lately. But it's this data-driven aspect that I think is really a cool angle. But then there's, and I think a lot of people are going to be driving more, like we just said, towards that whole data aspect. Then there's a security aspect. Now, so we had a survey question that went out, and I want to at least state this, and we can kind of keep going forward. But we asked what the top network challenge for your business was in our survey question this week. Thanks to all those who participated in the survey. But the overwhelming response, which the options were ease of access, end-to-end security, extensive connectivity, operational efficiency, overwhelmingly the response was end-to-end security. And I know, there are things in technologies related to modern edge, SASE and other things like that get us excited. What do you guys think about that security? The fact that everybody's still talking about security, even though we're talking about a lot of data.
Well, I think the need around security isn't going to go away, and the risk of data exiting an environment becomes higher as we look at the edge and ultimately diversify the different ways that we're able to connect. So just huge focus for us to look at, how do we micro segment in the right way that helps to secure a network? How do we bring the right visibility? How do we bring the right analytics to the data that's entering and exiting an environment? And it's it's not the simple kind of north-south type of firewalling that we experienced in the past. We have to have that east-west kind of security within the environments we're in, but also thinking about that data sensitivity, how we classify it, how we handle the data, which is growing, as you mentioned earlier, at a dramatic pace. So we have more data to manage, and we've ultimately still got the security kind of skills shortage that we've been experiencing for years now. So how do we provide that security with the resources that we have? And that really brings a lot of new tool sets to bear to be able to handle that, automate, ultimately run playbooks against, and reduce the manual effort that's required to be able to secure.
Great point.
Yeah, really great points, Rob. And we think about that traditional kind of castle and moat structure with our classic data centers. We had well-defined networks, and then we had to really change our security paradigm with the introduction of public cloud in this hyper-connected world. And then we see edge just again pushing us into other ways to think about security. Jason had mentioned SASE, so we see within SASE of things like firewall as a service, secure web gateways, software-defined wide area networks, right? And so we see this whole new class of tools. And so what I really love and what gets me stoked about our industry is we've just got a new challenge, right? Edge is just bringing us a new security context, a new challenge. And it's really cool to see all the vendor solutions and, kind of the skilled teammates that we have to bring those vendor solutions to life, and really help us implement a framework like SASE to protect the edge.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, we're talking a lot about pieces and parts here. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to this. And it can get a little overwhelming, right? To, I think, folks. But I mean, I think it's fair to say that the early adopters are already in this game. We're hitting the wave now where a lot of folks are looking at, can they afford not to leverage these newer technologies from a security perspective, certainly, but from a manageability and operational aspects. I mean, some of the greatest features that you can get out of, doing this right are the way that you can operationalize this and standardize and manage a very large environment in a very profound way.
Yeah. So Jason, you just brought up standardization, and I think this is worth, bringing back to you because this is your world, but ultimately the strategy that's applied and having a cohesive strategy, a clean roadmap for where you're going and how you're going to execute. I think edge is not something that you want to kind of piecemeal together. You're going to wind up with too many disparate solutions that ultimately don't interoperate correctly. And having that kind of centered strategy, I think, is really important. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, how you get started on that strategy and that roadmap and that journey to create success at the end.
No, great question. And we always kind of drift back to this particular topic, regardless of the topic that we're on, because it is way better regardless of where insight kind of rolls, as to have a strategy, right? Understand, don't the piecemeal aspects, if we're talking about security in this case. A lot of folks acquire technology kind of like a menu. Oh, I'll have the appetizer, I'll have the main course, and I'll have the dessert maybe. And they don't necessarily do that in a way. There's budget obviously affects those things, interoperability and strategy, and getting all the right folks in the room to kind of talk about what the business outcomes that we're actually looking for. And that's classic, the approach from a solutions approach, which is really where we kind of focus here at Insight, right? Not kind of, definitely focus. And I think that's one of the important aspects when I think about this, is it's more than the firewalls. It's more than, there's all of those things. It's the data, to Michael's earlier point. It's all of those things have to come into play. So I think what you really what's going to drive anything these days, it's not the technology for technology's sake. It's what are the business outcomes that we're trying to drive here. If it's to make it more standardized and operational so we can go fast, if it's to be able to leverage the latest technologies that we've got on the edge, and capabilities of AI and cloud that we couldn't use before, but now we're enabled to because of the speed that we can operate at and the processing that can happen not inside our data center. Those are the things that we've got to drive. And then we back into, how are we going to secure this with that, that doesn't mean you have to predict the future, but it does mean you have to have a strategy. And as you go forward, follow that governance so that you can have things that integrate properly. Sorry if I got too deep on that, but you set me up, and it is an exciting thing to talk about, because it makes me, I don't know if cringe is the right word, but I always worry about folks that are just chasing the latest technology without understanding, what they're trying to do from a business perspective. Because, you get folks that are focused on infrastructure or folks that are focused on certain parts of the business. It's really important to understand the whole, what you're trying to accomplish here, I think. And that's where you're going to get leverage most certainly out of an edge solution.
Yeah, and a really great way that I think to think about edge is it's just bringing computational power processing to where you do business, right? Whether that's point of sale, whether that's point of care in the healthcare industry, right? Whether that's point of manufacture. All you're doing is you're bringing those great technology investments to where you conduct your business. Don't lose sight of that when you're implementing your edge solution.
Love it.
Yeah.
So we got a couple of use cases. Maybe that'd be helpful. We can kind of bounce in and around those things. Rob, you mentioned one earlier. Do you want to talk about it? Oh, and we don't mention names or anything, but please.
Yeah. So we'll leave names out, but had an opportunity to work with a beverage bottler on the West Coast, and they really do some interesting stuff in the way that they are creating operational efficiencies in their business. They look at IT as a cost, and that cost is allocated as cents per case of product that leaves the warehouse. And so that's really an interesting way to look at it. But at the end of the day, they're trying to drive an ROI that creates a better business outcome while still reducing the cost of the infrastructure, of the security, and ultimately the edge. And we did some really cool stuff, and ultimately created a strategy like we talked about beforehand. So we created that strategy, developed a roadmap, and it really started holistically with this client having what they perceived as the root cause was wireless connectivity issues. And as we dug deeper, that wireless connectivity turned into, business continuity, disaster recovery, top level strategy. And ultimately we wound up designing this modern edge based warehouse that had compartmentalized security, that had, next generation wireless. And they were doing something really cool, running what they called laser guided vehicles that, have a number of terms out there, but these things operate on Wi-Fi. If the Wi-Fi is unavailable, they stop operating. Well, with the new infrastructure we were able to deploy, they reduced their forklift faults by 95%, which ultimately created a a very measurable but much improved ship rate out of the warehouse, where they were able to actually recognize that value. And that's, by the time you layer on security, by the time you layer on application productivity and, human intelligence and whatnot. So we've really created a foundation that optimized their warehouse facility in a way that they were able to, create a business advantage for themselves using technology. And, that's one of the reasons I love waking up in the morning, is we get to solve problems like that.
No, that's awesome. And I mean, the point is they made this investment. They've enabled themselves to even embrace newer technologies now, and they still lowered cost in the long run, and along with increasing safety and other things, that's amazing. And, that's manufacturing, right? It's not something that we typically think of, but man, that really changed the game, I think, in that particular case, which is awesome.
Totally.
Michael, I know you had one as well.
Yeah, so we were able to work with a large food processing and manufacturing company, and so very remote set of warehouses and distribution and packaging centers, and so they simply not enough bandwidth, right, to run analytics and different things that inside a public cloud or inside of a data center. And so very unique challenge that this customer of ours was facing, that how do I actually run my AI and machine learning models, right, specifically around computer vision, right? So we want to make sure there's not cross contamination or potential issues with food that's being packaged. So again, driving better safety outcomes. So you look at that scenario of, hey, we've built these great ML models in our public cloud hyperscaler, yet we can't run them in real time to actually affect a health outcome, right? Where we can find out about maybe a cross contamination after the fact, right? After maybe we have waste product and things. So what we're able to do is bring through computer vision models and a pretty rich AI stack within edge computing, within those packaging centers, able to detect in near real time any kind of cross contamination in any scenario. So we see this great opportunity to use technology, specifically edge technology, running AI ML with computer vision, all these interconnected cameras, right, for visibility, to drive safer outcomes and better food quality, less waste, more efficient margins for this customer.
So I think one of the really cool things, listening to that use case and, obviously the one that I talked about a minute ago is really that intersection of IT and OT infrastructure where, historically those were very separated, but now we're coming together in a world where we're bringing that OT and those process networks into the IT environment, providing the level of uptime, reliability, and ultimately satisfying the expectations that they had for the process networks, but being able to create real business outcomes as a result of those coming together. And then the influx of IoT intelligence, the amount of sensors, the devices, the machines that are out there, the machines and devices that don't actually interact with humans, that just interact with each other, from an influx of new connectivity perspective. Some really cool stuff going on there.
Oh, very cool. No, and I love that interpretation. I think, the point I love is, in manufacturing, I said earlier after your comment, Rob, that, we don't typically think of manufacturing as this place, but I think it's right for a lot of the benefits that you can get from this technology, because to Michael's point, some of that wasn't available on the edge in real time. And once we do have that capability on the edge in real time, because of the infrastructure being in place and because of the capability of the devices, man, now we can do all of this stuff that we never thought was possible before. And I think that's super exciting, and obviously not just relegated to manufacturing, but I think, it's pretty exciting.
For sure. Sure.
So what do I think we like to kind of focus a little bit on, the folks that are listening, they're getting jazzed up, they're excited. What are some of the challenges? I think we kind of already said you want to come up with a business outcome that you're driving to. That's both of your use cases had that, and I think that's why they were successful. What are some challenges or some advice that we would give to folks out there that are thinking about this, or that are maybe somewhere along the journey? How do they kind of stick with it?
Well, that's the $1 million question. So I've always been a fan of the saying of start with the end in mind. So I think, trying to figure out where you're going before you start on that journey is obviously critical. We know that, as IT professionals, that a lot of times those journeys start, without us, and we're chasing to catch up. And there's certainly an element of that, but having a clear set of KPI and goals that you're trying to achieve, and ultimately just navigating in a structured way. We've built and built success on really structured methodologies here at Insight that help us to create outcomes for clients. And that starts with envisioning and ideation with executives, and then ultimately bringing the right parties to the table to work collectively towards a common goal. I also have seen many organizations fall victim of trying to drive this level of transformation out of a single org, whether it's the data center org or the network org or the security org or whatever it may be. Really what's most critical is getting to the root cause or the root of the business objective from the business side of the house, and then hoping to translate that into technology solutions. So that's ultimately where I start and try and get to. And there's a lot of different ways to get there. And Michael, I'm sure you've got your angle as well. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and I think, Rob, great to really frame everything in a business context, right? We're driving a business outcome, and the OCM, the organizational change management aspects. I think you covered those really well. So just a couple what I call technical learnings from the field. We see clients that are highly successful when they implement like digital twin technologies. So you've got maybe tens or hundreds of thousands new sensors, devices that you're going to deploy to the field. So what if we could model those ahead of time? What if we could take, and for those unaware, a digital twin is just really a digital representation of a physical object. So we can instantiate, here's what a configuration, and again, it's cloning what those IoT type sensors and devices would look like in the field. So you're able to model, you're able to reduce your risk of implementation. So you don't backload all your risk when you implement. You're able to, really model out and look how things are going to perform. Are there things you haven't thought about? And so you get a lot of digital feedback before you've implemented hundreds of thousands of devices at scale. So you get these learnings in a much faster digital cycle. So again, our most successful implementations, we see that digital twin technology absolutely implemented. Other major, what I would call technical factor to success, is go in understanding that you're going to need new technology to manage at a fleet and a scale perspective. We see a lot of success, and especially from public cloud hyperscalers driving like Kubernetes type technologies at the edge to kind of abstract some of those compute platforms, but give us a ton of rich management and governance on top of that. Because if you think about it, if we've got 100,000 sensors and you're trying to manage those in a bespoke fashion, there's absolutely no way you're going to be able to have enough human capital to run those devices at scale, image them at scale, configure them at scale, make sure you're getting valid data for them at scale. So, really think about your fleet management and those key technology decisions up front.
Brilliant. No, and I think, Rob, I loved your point about, getting everybody together, understand those business objectives to do it right, the end in mind. I'm trying to articulate this as well as I can. I think that aspect of, when we think of modern edge, we think a lot about infrastructure. And I think both of the solutions that we've talked about today included more than infrastructure elements to it. They included certainly security we talked about, but I mean, there's some development side. There's some, and the thing, Rob, that I was trying to get to that I was struggling with was that it needs everybody to kind of be involved in this to be successful. And I think because not one part of the organization can lift the whole rest of the organization up, and that OCM aspect is key. And I think that's probably, if I were going to say what are the biggest challenges to something like this, and Michael, your points were super, super valid on that. Hey, let's push out 100,000 things. We're going to get all of this great enriched data. But how do we do that? I mean, that's a non-trivial affair. Even if you understand how that technology is going to work once it's in place, how it's operationalized and how it's maintained is something that a lot of people don't put a lot of thought into. And I love the fact of modeling it before it's actually out there. And you run into those problems prior to, as opposed to in post, which is horrible. That's some really, so I love to find the gold nuggets that are in each episode. I think both of those things are super key. And that's, sorry, you guys got me really excited about this. I didn't think I was going to be excited about modern edge, but this is awesome. Any parting words? I mean, I think we've kind of gotten to a great point that I want to leave everybody with that good feeling about it. But any parting words that we would want to say on this topic? I'll go to Michael and then I'll go to Rob.
Yeah, I read a statistic that 75% of all data is going to be processed outside of your traditional cloud or data center environment by the year 2025. So, really the intelligent edge is here. Avail yourself of the technologies, prepare yourself for it. Again, we see it's nonlinear growth. It's not slowing down. So, take some of the recommendations today, and definitely embrace it, right? Because the cloud has become the edge has become a first-class citizen where compute gets done.
Love it.
Yeah, I would just add, flexibility, I think, is going to be key. And that's really a big part of what the modern edge is about, is being able to have the flexibility to bring the data, the application. I think, Jason, you were talking about security and the different components. I think what's most user facing at the end of the day is going to be the application that runs on the secure infrastructure that in a perfect world is completely transparent to the user and to the application. So I think just bringing it all together and knowing that flexibility is key, and being prepared to be able to offer that flexibility in a consistent way, I think is going to set us up for a successful future.
Beautiful. No, and I love that. And somebody alluded to it earlier, that methodology that we have, that we the way that we approach it. And I think, again, it's awesome to be at a place like Insight, where we've got the architecture, we've got the infrastructure, we've got the engineers, we've got the relationships with the vendors to bring all of that thing together. And I think that's a pretty unique aspect about being here, is that full soup to nuts and delivering on the business outcomes. Again, we try not to be a salesy kind of thing. This isn't sales. This is really just admiration for being able to have a full solution around this particular topic. So thank you guys both for what you do for our clients, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. So if you want to know more about what we do here at Insight, please visit us at solutions.insight.com. Thank you guys for watching, and thanks for chatting with us on the show. Cheers.